What if the most dangerous damage happening inside your body right now is something you cannot feel, cannot see, and would never notice until the consequences are already years in motion? That is the trap most people fall into. They think inflammation only matters when it becomes obvious. A stiff knee, a swollen joint, a pounding headache, an aching back that refuses to settle down. So they wait for pain to announce the problem. They wait for symptoms to give them permission to take it seriously. And by the time that happens, the deeper process has often been running silently for a very long time. Because the most harmful inflammation is not the kind that shouts. It is the kind that whispers. It works below the level of sensation, deep inside your cells, where no ache warns you and no visible sign tells you to pay attention. It does not just make you feel run down or older than you should. Left unchecked, it begins to interfere with the very instructions that keep your body functioning properly. It affects the stability of your DNA. And once that process starts repeating day after day, year after year, the damage is no longer just about discomfort. It becomes about how your body ages, how your cells defend themselves, and how easily normal repair systems begin to fall behind. This is the part most people are never taught. Your DNA is not sitting inside you untouched and protected from life. It takes hits every single day. Every time a cell divides, every time your body produces energy, every time you are exposed to sunlight, pollution, stress, or the normal byproducts of metabolism, tiny forms of damage occur. That is not unusual. That is part of being alive. Under normal conditions, your body is built for this. It has highly specialized repair systems, constantly scanning, identifying errors, and correcting them before those errors become something more serious. Think of it like a round-the-clock maintenance team working in silence while you sleep, patching weak spots, fixing breaks, and keeping the whole system stable without asking for attention. But chronic inflammation changes the environment those repair teams have to work in. When inflammation stays elevated for too long, even at low levels, it floods the body with unstable molecules that create oxidative stress. These molecules behave like tiny sparks, landing again and again on sensitive material. Suddenly, the repair systems are not dealing with an occasional problem. They are dealing with a relentless stream of new damage. The workload rises. The pressure increases. The cleanup crew cannot keep pace forever. And when that happens, mistakes remain. Those mistakes accumulate. Over time, what was once small and repairable can become the starting point for far more serious problems. That is why inflammation and DNA damage should never be treated as separate issues. They feed each other. Inflammation increases damage, and damage can keep inflammation active. It becomes a loop, and the longer that loop runs, the harder it is for the body to return to balance. So the real question is not simply how to calm inflammation for a day or two. The real question is how to lower that inflammatory burden while also supporting the systems your body already uses to defend and repair itself. That is the connection that changes everything. Because once you understand it, you stop thinking about health as symptom control and start thinking about it as cellular protection. And here is where this becomes far more practical than most people expect. The tool that can influence both sides of this process is not hidden in an expensive protocol or locked behind a prescription. It is not something exotic, rare, or difficult to get. It is something that has probably been in your kitchen for years, something familiar enough that most people overlook it entirely. But using it casually is not the same as using it correctly, and that difference matters more than most realize. Because prepared the right way, this simple food can help calm inflammatory signaling while activating some of the body's most important protective responses at the same time. In the next part, I'll show you exactly what that food is, why most people get almost no real benefit from it, and the one preparation step that changes everything. That food is garlic. But before you dismiss that as something you already know, stay with me, because most people only to be yod garlic as a flavor. They do not understand it as a biological signal. And that difference is exactly why so many people use it regularly, yet get almost none of the protective effect the research is actually talking about. The garlic most people toss into a hot pan out of habit is not doing the same job as garlic prepared the right way. In fact, when handled properly, garlic becomes something far more powerful than a cooking ingredient. It becomes a direct message to the systems in your body that regulate inflammation, oxidative stress, and cellular repair. What makes garlic so remarkable is that its power does not come from one single vitamin or one simple nutrient. It comes from a family of sulfur-containing compounds that become active only under the right conditions. In other words, garlic is not automatically therapeutic just because it is present on your plate. Its protective chemistry has to be unlocked. And once that chemistry is activated, the compounds produced begin influencing some of the most important control systems in the body, including the ones involved in inflammatory signaling and DNA defense. The first of these compounds is created the moment garlic is crushed or chopped. Inside the intact clove, the important components are stored separately. But when the cell structure is broken, an enzyme is released and begins transforming those compounds into a new active molecule. That freshly formed molecule is responsible for garlic's sharp scent, but its real importance goes much deeper than smell. It interacts with a major inflammatory pathway in the body, a pathway that acts like a master switch for the expression of pro-inflammatory genes. When that switch stays turned on too often or for too long, the immune system remains in a low-grade state of activation. The body keeps producing inflammatory signals. Oxidative stress rises. The cellular environment becomes more damaging, and DNA repair becomes harder to sustain. Garlic, when activated correctly, helps quiet that switch. Not by shutting down the immune system, and not by forcing the body into some artificial state, but by helping reduce the unnecessary overactivity that becomes so common with age, stress, poor diet, and long-term metabolic strain. That matters because inflammation is not always dramatic. Much of the damage comes from the steady, low-level background activity that never gets enough attention. Garlic helps interrupt that pattern. But that is only one side of the story. Garlic also contains compounds that influence another pathway, one that functions more like an internal defense coordinator. This pathway helps the body strengthen its antioxidant systems and increase the production of enzymes involved in identifying and repairing cellular damage. If the inflammatory pathway is like a stuck accelerator pushing damage forward, this protective pathway is like the command center, calling in reinforcements, restoring order, and improving the body's ability to defend itself. That is why garlic is so interesting in the research. It is not just lowering inflammatory pressure, it is also supporting the repair side of the equation. And there is a third layer. Some of garlic's sulfur compounds help lower specific inflammatory messengers that are closely associated with accelerated aging, immune dysfunction, and impaired repair capacity. These messengers are often elevated in people who appear outwardly fine, but are quietly experiencing the kind of internal stress that wears the body down over time. When those signals stay high, they create an environment where the body spends more time reacting and less time restoring. Garlic helps shift that balance. This is where the conversation changes from tradition to mechanism. We are not talking about folklore or guesswork. We are talking about something measured at the cellular level. A food that, when prepared properly, can influence how the body regulates inflammation and how it supports the repair systems that protect genetic integrity. That is why preparation matters so much. Because if you use garlic the way most recipes tell you to, you may get the taste, but you lose much of the effect that makes it worth using in the first place. In part 3, I'll show you what the research found, the dose that mattered, and why one common cooking habit destroys the very compounds you are trying to activate. So what does the evidence actually suggest when garlic is used the right way? And how do you make sure you are getting the real biological benefit instead of just the flavor? This is where the details matter. Because the value of garlic is not simply that it is healthy in a general sense. The value is that its active compounds appear to influence measurable markers connected to inflammation, oxidative stress, and cellular protection. In study after study, researchers have looked at changes in inflammatory signals, antioxidant activity, and the expression of enzymes involved in repair and defense. What keeps standing out is not that garlic works like magic. It is that, when used consistently and prepared correctly, it behaves like a powerful nutritional input that helps the body return to a more protective state. That is why dose and preparation are not small details. They are the whole difference. The range most often associated with measurable benefit is roughly 2 to 3 cloves a day. Less than that may be too little to create a meaningful effect. And more is not always better, especially if it causes digestive discomfort. But the bigger mistake is not the amount. It is the way people prepare it. Most people either swallow it whole, mix it into food too quickly, or expose it to high heat the moment it is chopped. That last mistake is the one that ruins the process for almost everyone. Garlic's most important compounds do not fully activate the instant you cut into it. They need time. Once the clove is crushed or chopped, the enzyme reaction begins, and that reaction needs several minutes to produce the beneficial compounds that are responsible for much of garlic's anti-inflammatory potential. If you throw it straight into very hot oil or intense heat right away, you interrupt that process before it has had a chance to complete. You still get aroma. You still get taste. But you lose much of the effect that makes garlic worth using for more than flavor. That is why one of the most important habits is also one of the simplest. Crush it or chop it, then let it sit. Give it that short window before cooking or eating it. That small pause is what turns garlic from a seasoning into a meaningful therapeutic food. And timing matters too. Using it with a larger meal, especially one that contains healthy fats, may improve the availability of some of its active compounds. Olive oil, avocado, nuts, seeds, or a balanced meal can help create a better context for absorption. For people who do not tolerate raw garlic well, aged garlic preparations may offer a more practical option, especially when standardized and made specifically to preserve the sulfur compounds linked to the effects seen in research. But even then, the principle remains the same. Not every garlic product is equal, and not every form delivers the same biological response. This is really the bigger lesson behind all of this. The body is not fragile, but it is responsive. It is constantly adapting to the signals you give it. Chronic inflammation may work silently, but so does repair. So does defense. So does recovery. Your cells are not waiting for a miracle. They are waiting for conditions that allow them to do the work they were designed to do. That is why something as ordinary as garlic matters. It is not because one food solves everything. It is because one well-used food can shift an internal environment that has been moving in the wrong direction for years. And maybe that is the most hopeful part of all. The damage caused by chronic inflammation does not begin with drama, and support does not always begin with something extreme either. Sometimes it begins with understanding, with knowing that your daily choices are not small, with realizing that preparation can matter as much as ingredients, with seeing that the difference between passive eating and purposeful eating can be the difference between feeding the problem and feeding the repair system that stands between you and deeper damage. So start simple. 2 crushed cloves. Let them rest before heat. Use them consistently. Respect the process. Because inflammation may be quiet, but so is healing when you finally support it the right way. And if this series changed the way you think about food, inflammation, and aging, subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your next step could change more than your meals. It could change the way your body protects itself for years to come.